We saw yesterday how Paul wrote his letter to the Ephesians, stressing to them that it was God who'd taken all the initiative to fulfill his plan, and that he'd given them everything they needed to play their part in the plan. The plan was that the world become reconciled to God and with one another. In fact, that all of creation would be reconciled under the headship of Christ. Now he's going on to say that the church is the body of Christ and Christ is the head. Therefore, it's through the church that God will carry out his plan. But for the moment, I want to focus on Jesus. Verse 6 of the first chapter describes Jesus as the beloved. In the Old Testament, that's a term that is used to refer to Israel. Isaiah 5, verse 1. But then it's also used as a reference to the coming Messiah. Psalm 2:7, Isaiah 42:1. In the New Testament, of course, we read how at the Transfiguration, the disciples heard the voice, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." So both Israel and Jesus are referred to as the beloved. This is because Jesus is actually the true Israel. Where Israel had been called to serve God and to be obedient, they had failed. Jesus came as the true Israel, and he served God and he was obedient. Just read Philippians 2. Who, being the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in the appearance of a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on the cross. Then we also have the story of Abraham and Isaac. And Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son, but instead the blood of a ram was given. Now that remained only as a reminder of the cost of sin. It wasn't until God gave his only son that sin could actually be paid for. Now we're told in verse 7, we have redemption through Jesus and through his blood. The word redemption was used to describe the time that they were taken out of Egypt, released from slavery, and also the time that they were taken out of exile, so their times of release. And these are seen purely as the act and the power of God. And so here we have the word redemption by Jesus' blood, because this is purely an act of God and his power that brings us release from slavery to sin. Paul then stresses the nature of God in doing this. He said it's through the riches of his grace that he has lavished upon us. Now, grace is actually the opposite of stinginess. Grace is lavished upon us. It's God's work. And the result of this redemption is that our spiritual eyes are opened and that we can come to all wisdom and understanding. And the wisdom being the knowledge that sees into the very heart of things, not just as they might appear on the surface. And the understanding is the insight we need to know what is the right action. This is God's plan. It's God's plan and it's God's timing. All things are to be united under Christ. He brings everything into true relationship with each other. And this plan is a plan for the whole universe. We, the church, are the ones who are to carry on the ministry of Jesus. Therefore, we are to work with him as his work is carried out in this world. It's a challenge, our task to carry on God's plan. But also, he's challenging us to be a role model of what it's like in God's kingdom.